how our civilization, the way that we have developed in accordance with the greater forces, the celestial gods, you could say, the program, if you will, the way that we have incarnated into these forms, incarnate, to be embodied or embedded into the flesh, we have had this possibility of mutation. If we were not mutative, individual, in other words, this human species would die out. So when we're talking about the cosmological studies of the human design system, what you'll find is that it's gray material, as Ra would call it, as in there is no proof, so to speak. Indeed, all of the human design system can be verified empirically within your own life. So there's a certain number of personality crystals, the incarnation of the passenger or the witness, the consciousness in form. These crystals, if we were to imagine looking at the earth right now, just imagine that the earth is underneath this vast swirling pool of crystals of consciousness. There's a certain number of us, personality crystals of consciousness, that are always ready and available or able to experience form. And yet, how many of us ever really get the opportunity? Well, obviously you and me, because we are embodied here and now, we get to have that experience and that opportunity. So in the perspective of being human over these last centuries, we see over, particularly during this time of the cross of planning, since the beginning of the 1600s, that more people have lived and died than ever before on this planet. It means that more and more human incarnation has been taking place. And the ability for all of us to have this fun, fabulous, sometimes tragic, sometimes humorous dance of incarnation. The ability for all of us to have this mutative opportunity to be witness to the form principle mutating. As we as a human species, you could say, globally gestating, if you will, the purpose of awareness, which is in this embodiment, most of these crystals of consciousness have incarnated for the first time and for the only time, according to Ra, in the last 400 years. And not all, of course, of the incarnating crystals. Serendipity does play a huge role in our ability to be embodied in form. And I know a lot of people say, I chose to be here. Or I would say that we are dragged kicking and screaming, choicelessly, helplessly. You know, he sometimes is a bit dramatic with his language to make a point in that. This opportunity for the only time potentially for some people, because they emerge into a cultural principle, as in the way in which we treat death or the decay of the body, the discards of the physical form once the body is done or died, has died. Because the body is treated correctly for it to achieve its bardo, what happens is our culture denies us the opportunity to return to source, that source of the place and space from which we come from. And yet, how do we get back to it? Well, most of these crystals of consciousness that are floating around, disembodied, non-incarnate, didn't get their bardo. The ones that didn't get back to source, they bundle, they gather. And the key to understanding what we are mystically, if we understand that all of this is a resonance principle, potentially we are perfect frequency, the way we look at and think about and process and be. It is the frequency, which is facilitated by awareness, that is the only thing that matters because we live in a vibrating universe. So frequency, when we talk about frequency in human design terms, we're talking about the mechanical truth. You cannot adjust your frequency from the mental space, from the mental plane. You can source into the body, the vehicle, the form principle, and come from this space of alignment or attunement, the frequency of the very nature of being, of that which it is that you came here for. So we've had this phenomenon that has been developing basically since the major religions were established several thousand years ago, of people who did not get their full opportunity to disincarnate in such a way that allowed them to come back to or return to their source, that which they came from. So, rogue crystal bundles, approximately 10,000 to 2 million crystals bundled together. Why do they bundle? Frequency. The main personality bundle, these hundreds of millions of crystals within a bundle, very different in the predominance of frequency. For one thing, much less, over on the rogue side, much more on those main crystal bundles out there. So we have this, since the major religions were established, this phenomenon of more expansions of these rogue crystal bundles wandering around the planet, bonding together through frequency. So the major personality crystal bundles, the primary 16, you go, if you want to learn about them, Faces of the Gods, Godhead, on Jovian Archive. But those rogue crystal bundles, minor in size, comparatively speaking. Not only these increasing in size themselves, but also expanding in number for the last several thousand years. But particularly because we have had so much of an explosion of the human population, so much more now lately, when we look at these archetypal natures of how we experience and express the non-physical. In other words, our attunement to how we translate the energetics that we come into contact with. The moment that one of these crystal bundles come into contact with you, if you are sensitive to it, if they are drawn to you or you to them, they tend to be drawn to those who are transferred. Transference. This is a new term for you, meaning on the fundamental level, why transference happens, there we go, is because they're not in alignment. The form principle, not being treated in alignment with what it came here for, not being honored, respected, nourished, valued, supported in such a way that its fullest differentiated potential has the power to express or the opportunity to flower. So the most intensive phenomena of the last several thousand years has been this crowding of personality crystal rogue bundles, the impact of these rogue bundle forces, and not that there are 6 different kinds of bundles. It's simply that what we have here are groupings of crystals by frequency, and then the interpretation of those crystal bundles coming from this space of awareness of such, our awareness of such, our interpretation of such, our resonance or vibration with such. We, as human beings, have the potential to interpret each of these differently, but they are all the same thing, a collection of frequencies. So there are no separations. This is the alien crystal bundle, and this is the God crystal bundle. Nope. They all are the same thing. It's just our anthropomorphization. What a word. Our projection onto such. The angels, they're going to save me. The demons, the ghosts, the gods, the entities, the aliens are coming. How is it that we will interpret these things. You can find what your proclivity is in the human design system. What is it that you're going to be attuned to, tapped into, turned on by? And in truth, what the danger is to be distracted, that you distort your interpretation of what they're saying, in that you obsess with them, finding them, talking to them, communing with them, giving over your authority to them. That is the challenge with the obsession with these different crystal bundles. Again, they are separated, as in they group together, but there is, in the knowing of Ra as he interpreted this system, there are no differences between them, just frequency. And how you interpret the frequency of the bundle has more to do with you than with them. So they are not in and of themselves conscious in the way in which we understand consciousness as humans. They are an instrument of the programming of the Maya mechanics. But rather than the primary bundles, the 16 Godheads, they operate very deeply through our chemistry, okay? From the bottom up, our chemistry, our perspective of motivational frequency. That's the primary 16 Godheads that we can attune to. We don't want to live out their dead myth. We definitely want to be able to attune to being our own authority in alignment with the form principle, our form principle. No authority outside of you telling you what to do. Not even God. Oh, the heresy. So, rogue crystal bundles, these groupings of personality crystal bundles, they operate on the surface, as in surface connection to our frequency. So you're walking around a haunted house, not too unusual to get the heebie-jeebies or feel creeped out by, the state of disarray of the environment because it's a haunted house. You might feel what people call bad energy, or the hauntedness or the woundedness. You might just be attuned to that. And when it comes to your own nature of being in this body, in this vehicle, and being so obsessed with the mind, its obsession, objectification, illusions, delusions, we then attract to us those who would like to influence us. And that's the rogue crystal bundles. Rogue crystal bundles are more attracted to those who are easily influenceable. And who is that? Anyone operating out of integrity. We call that transference, because that's really the end game as far as the end of the story, unfortunately. So when it comes to these, remember, it's not a connection to us. It's a connection to frequency. And that's where we have dilemmas that rise. So we're looking at your conscious personality, color, motivation, frequency. This does not affect the body. This is only a personality process, personality challenge. So as an example, if you are designed by nature, okay, as a 6 color, innocence, motivation, designed to attune to aliens, what happens is that when you're in a 6 in transference to the 3, ghosts are going to be there that you're attuned to, your interpretation of that rogue crystal bundle as a ghost. And so, of course, when you don't have your cognitive potential of being innocence in your motivational frequency, there's a distortion to the encounter, and it leads to problems, dependencies, an inability to reconnect to what's right for you, because the limitation of living in this Maya, mechanics of Maya, the illusion that is dictated is that there is a material plane drive. So 6 color, innocence, motivational frequency. That means all harmonic profiles. All harmonic profiles of the 12 profiles are innocently motivated. So all of them, rather than being innocence and bridging us harmonically, being harmonious between mind and body in their own nature of being, rather than being that, instead they're driven by blind desire for the material plane. So money oriented, money driven, looking for that desperation of fulfillment. And what are they attuned to on the non physical? Ghosts. So haunted by their ghosts, haunted by the ghosts of what it is that they're trying to run away from, potentially. The ghosts catch up with them, the ghosts of their past that catch up with them. I learned this knowledge from not only Ra, but Darshana Deborah Matthews. And she said that she asked Ra if these crystals would ever incarnate again, the rogue crystal bundles. And Ra said that they're not. He said, in terms of these rogue bundles, if there is a purpose, he was not told anything about them having a purpose. These are the ways in which they have their disposal. There's no polite way to say it according to him. So these crystals, not ever going to incarnate again, not ever to go beyond the doorway of the transformation that comes at the end of this round of evolution. So in the geometry, because everything is geometry, all of us spiraling through space and time, there are not as many of them as there are humans now, here now, alive now. So if you're worried, I know I was when I heard about all this until I came across this aspect of what he said. I was worried that there would be tons and tons of them. Like maybe I could wander through my house and there would be all of these different things that I might bump into back in the day. I have a very wild imagination, hey? So there's either a selection process that's taking place or an encounter as far as the relationship of why certain bundles group together, why they have a grasp of the demon realm, angelic realm, entities, gods, aliens, ghosts, what have you. We don't know why, just that it's frequency. And it's the interpretation of that frequency by the human. And not everybody is going to encounter a rogue bundle. They're not that plentiful. We all put out a frequency. We all have our own chemistry. However, if you think about homogenized societies being run by their mind, which we know is part of Maya, or the illusion and delusion of this material plane, the vast majority of the planet out of integrity in transference. So even so, not everyone in transference will encounter a rogue crystal bundle. Not everyone in transference who is putting out a transferred frequency is going to be aligned to these bundles. The bundles will be attracted to them. The easier that it is for them to influence you, the more attractive you will be to them. So the older of the rogue bundles probably do have some kind of personality, Ra says. That is, personality in terms of a consistent influence along a human fractal line that it has had connections to. So we can imagine, as an example, the person who is horribly transferred, we'll say, again, to use our example of the innocence motivation, the 6, who is transferred to the 3, and living out the desire for material plane business instead of being innocently motivated, being ridden by the ghosts of their past, or potentially even their connection with what they think their ancestral past might have been, could have been, would have been, should have been, anything that feels out of integrity. In other words, here, You know how we use resistance as a signpost of out of integrity with the nature of being? Frustration, anger, bitterness, disappointment. We can use the term obsession here when one is transferred, giving up one's own authority to the ancestors or the ghosts or the desires that ride you. So all of the godheads that represented the primary crystal bundles, these older rogue bundles probably do have some kind of, you could say descendants from, because that's where they came from originally anyway. But it will have that connective field. The older they are, the larger the grouping, the more connective field it will have to its fractal nature. So by themselves, not a conscious thing, but an encounter that we have with these forces, the construct, all of this blindness when transferred. Okay, this is the transferred motivation inside and the transference words here on the outside of the colors that one is actually here to be. So this is all a construct of the what Ra would call not self, the not self motivated in such a way that it cannot see because it has a lack of mental acuity. Because when you're transferred, your cognitive potential isn't there. It's not. We cannot just snap our fingers and shift our focus and all of a sudden, boom, we're out of transference. It's not a head game. However, can we watch the movie? Can we be aware? It's the awareness game that we're all playing here in human design anyway. It's about the development, the facilitation of consciousness, of your awareness. So the reputation that these forces have, the way that they influence humanity, rooted in the transference, because that's what we see generally, not in the potential of whatever relationship with these rogue crystal bundles may be or may not be. There's this programming where the rogue crystal bundle programming happens to be whatever it is for whatever it's worth. It's not that it's filled with bad crystals. It's that the phenomenon of translating the non-physical by the person who is translating the non-physical has led us to homogenized myths. Yeah, these things. It impacts your personality. It impacts your mind, your awareness. So whatever frequency is being put out as far as what the frequency of the being is, okay, a being, a human being, putting out a frequency, this is what the bundle would relate to. Now, when you look at angels morphing into gods, gods morphing into angels, it's again not so much that they are gods or truly angels, it's that your interpretation of the non-physical. It's telling you about how you're interpreting that energetic frequency, what you're putting out as a frequency. So something to experiment with. Those demons that morph into entities, or entities that morph into demons. Those ghosts that morph into alien, or aliens that morph into ghosts. And so round and round it goes. How is it that you will interpret non-physical? It all has to do with you and your adherence to what is true, your individuation, your sovereign nature of being unique, even though it might be seen as a freak. So it's so interesting when you look at the evolution of these numbers. One of the things that intrigues Ra most about the onion is the layers. If you have been studying human design for a while, you know there's so many layers to this, yeah? So many layers. So as we interpret, if you look at the evolution of the numbers, you look at first tone and you move all the way up to the 6. Triangle stands for the tone. If you look at the first color and you move up all the way to the 6, or you look at the first line and you move all the way up to that progression to the 6. It's not to say that 1 is not as good as 6 or that 6 is any better than any other, because it really doesn't have anything to do with that. This progression that we are looking at, this progressionary movement, this repeating fractal pattern, no matter which way that you look at it, no matter how you slice it and dice it, everything is a movement. Whenever you're looking at any one of these numbers in design, you have to look at them in terms of their evolutionary movement. The evolutionary movement from 1 to 6, and right after the 6, next we come back to a 1. It is part of how it's done. So think about the continuity, the resonance principle in terms of their evolutionary process. There's a sensitivity that emerges in the upper trigram, and what you'll find in the upper colors, again, sensitivity, as well as the right tones. Sensitivity, it's a mutation. It's something that is different. It doesn't have the same grounding in the processes that it is associated with at the fundamental level. Remember, lower trigram, upper trigram, trigram, lower trigram, upper trigram. And then we have the colors, lower colors, upper colors. And then we have the tones. This is what is different, or evolutionarily speaking, emerging out of the foundational process. So there is an enormous number of rogue bundles that carry with them a very strong 5th and 6th frequency connectivity, according to Ra. Remember how he said we have this explosion of rogue bundles over the last 400 years? For one thing, because lots of people dying. And we think about, oops, apologies for the typo there, flu, F-L-U, that people dying like flies, you would say, all over this planet, having to be immediately dealt with, mass burials in order to manage the sheer numbers of dead or burning. So that means the body not being intact, not allowing the body to have its Bardo state. Then we have an enormous amount of rogue crystal bundles that carry with them that 5th and 6th frequency connectivity. This is the basis for our modern science fiction, isn't it? That we have, again, remember, right tones lead us to an evolutionary process that is cyclical, or a feeling basis. What kind of feeling do you get when you think about entities or aliens? Is it a homogenized feeling? Is it what they taught you to feel through our movies, our television, our mass media, magazines, comic books, mystery thrillers, or what have you? The very presence of the rogue bundle attraction to the 6th frequency, to the alien frequency, it's a relatively modern mutation. We look into the sky and we lose all sense of scale. We feel the vastness of space and those tiny little individuational points of solar star imprinting. This vast conglomerate of material that is mostly empty space, but full dark matter. Can we get lost in our tininess, our insignificance or smallness or nothingness, almost in relationship to the vastness that we cannot comprehend with the mind? I remember one time sitting in a chair, contemplating, I must have been about 11, contemplating my existence and feeling the crushing weight of nothingness. No matter what we, who we think we are, try to do, no matter what our imagination or our mathematics might point to. There is this vastness of the way in which we perceive the totality. And that is not something that we can grasp from this perspective, not in fullness. How could we? How can we see these things from the perspective of, remember, we live in a neutrino ocean. It's a vast, vast totality. Our human frequency on this planet Earth, as part of a cellular matrix that consists of our solar system, like a cell. Yeah, solar system. Think of the sun like a cell. We're just cells on top of this Earth cell, spiraling through space and time, part of a cell. I, as a cell, am not aware of all of you as cells. How could I be? I'm not connected to all of you as cells, each of us, part of the greater cellular matrix of the totality of human existence. This process, this life, this death, our cellness, our wholeness. As a cell, we are whole, and yet we are part of something greater. The vast totality in this reality, we are part, connected to all that is this greater ocean of potentiality. And what awareness may come from this particular point of imprinting has to do with our frequency. What frequency are you broadcasting at? Are you available to? Are you processing? Are you attuned to? Rogue bundles are made up of what I would say, quote unquote, dead parts, sort of, these abandoned things. The scrapyard of personality consciousness, according to him, to be really rude, were locked here, these rogue crystal bundles, because they're disincarnate beings. They're locked out of the game of incarnation, in carne, in the flesh. So this is the bin, but there's no recycling here. They just bundle. And the only time they can have influence is when you or I or anyone else has the opportunity, if you want to call it that, the situational circumstance to encounter one of these within our auric frequency and interpret it from a space that is not able to process it necessarily, authentically, unfortunately. So being able to hear from people, this is one of my calls I'd like to put out into the public realm. If you are designed to be connected to the angels or the demons, seeing the demons that ride people, or the ghosts, the disincarnate, the ancestors, or the gods, or the entities, or the aliens, if you really are that, yeah, you're 6 and you talk to aliens, I want to hear from you. What's it like for you to really be attuned to the aliens? Rather than being a third color who thinks they're a walk-in. That's what generally tends to happen. I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for substantiating truth, your personal experience. I asked this of my students who just took this course with me, and this is a little bonus call I'd like to put out to the general human design realm and see what have you to share with us. Would love to hear, because your personality crystal riding around on top of this beautiful vehicle has its own truth, individual truth. We all do. So what's it like for you? Each one of us needs to be able to go through our natural bardo in order to be picked up by the bundle from which we came. So it was given, this knowledge was given to Ra as a way to be correct in our death. According to he, it was as important as knowing how to live, which is a lot of the human design system. How do we make decisions we can trust? There is a right way to leave this plane. How does that happen? These angels, demons, ghosts, gods, entities, aliens, the rogue crystal bundles did not get their quote unquote right way. And they're not bad. It's not their fault. They're not evil. They're not anything. They are what they are. And they're interpreted by what they meet. And what they meet is mostly a transferred individual. And they influence your personality. So who are those out there who can tell us what it's like to correctly interpret the angelic realm, the demon realm, the ghostly realm, the God realm, the entity realm, the aliens realm? Because if indeed, like motivation was labeled, these are labeled for the transference, what is the truth of the angelic realm or the God realm, or the ghost realm versus the alien realm or entities and demons? What is the truth? Can we even know? Is it something that we can put our minds together, as they say, and discover? Would be nice to know. Yeah, I feel anyway. Or is it something that does not matter? Who knows? All I know is that this is part of my mental focus. What is it like for you, your inner truth? Truth is deeply individual. Now, most people, when they start saying, hey, I talked to an angel, they don't necessarily tell people so, because what happens is if we're not correct and we're really ranting about the prophecy, maybe they are one transferred to the four, ranting about the end of the world and the prophecies and such, it can get quite frightening, enthralling and frightening. And then is there a potential to get locked up? Who knows? So sane people don't want anybody to know that they might be a little bit off kilter. I talk to aliens. You going to admit that in polite company? Probably not. You don't want to be seen as cuckoo. I don't mind being seen as weird. Well, maybe a little. I don't have my camera on right now. Got my eyes closed. Very strange to be oneself. Very different. Very odd. Sometimes goofy. Incredibly weird. It depends, I imagine. We're all very different. So the thing I want to avoid is encouraging the vast disturbances and the obsessiveness. I don't want that. I don't want you to be afraid or frightened or concerned or treat yourself cruelly if you are transferred. I just want you to focus, or I invite you to, I ask you to, I inform you, I initiate you if it's right for you to tell me, share with me, let me know. What's your process? Rather than being disturbed and obsessed by the transference, what's your truth? Your individual truth. What's important always and in all ways is frequency. So the key to understanding mystically how we translate existence of the non-physical is that we are potentially a perfect frequency. When you are vibrating at such frequency that feels perfect to you, as in attuned and true, what is it that one emanates? And how is it that one emerges? This is what I'd like to see, know, experience, put weight on, and value to at this time in my experiment. This is what it's about. All the rest of the stuff and the fluff, anything that we think it has to matter, it must, it should. I'd like to let go of that and hear from the truth of your true frequency, which is all that really matters in the end. So I would love to hear from you. Again, you can adjust your frequency through form. And form frequency is a mechanical truth, which is why we have strategy and authority. You being your own authority. You cannot adjust frequency, not in truth, from the mental realm. You can use tools. What's your tool? I like being able to sink into my Soul Tech Lounge. It is a chair that has 0G gravity, just reclines so much so that you just feel like you're floating, all the weight being taken off of the spine and the legs and the shoulders and the neck. And then I pump frequency music, 40 hertz. I really love 40 hertz through that chair. And I sit and vibrate. It's like an induced meditation. My brain body system is right, quite like sound, quite like frequency. And by bathing in that frequency, allowing the body to unravel from any tension, stress, pressure, it helps the mind to let go instead of running the show. So there is this deconditioning process that being your own authority brings, and that's where it all begins. There's this slow process of attuning to the personality, witnessing, watching, being. The personality attuning to the body's innate frequency, not the mind trying to force or push on that one precious body with its one precious life to live. Because all forms incarnate once. And as we move through the wheel of time, when you're correct in your natal frequency, when you're properly consciously aware of one's motivational color, and it's not something that you can control or manipulate. It is witnessed after the fact as it is coloring the lines of your personality consciousness, how one is not only being as an awareness principle, but vibrating to, harmonizing with, allowing one's nature to express and emerge, liberated from choice in order to see. How can we get the mind to let go from running the show? Everyone has their own path and process, but if you experiment with the basic fundamental principles over time, you can align and you see. According to Ra, when your decisions are being made out of your inner authoritative process, you lose much interest in the forces. And yet at the same time, it opens up a doorway to being aware of them. Once you as a passenger have seen something, it's hard to unsee it. Yeah. The shock of recognition when you see someone you love operate out of integrity, and your mind recognizing that they are not at fault, that there is no blame, that you can applaud their role in being whatever it was that you needed for that interaction to engage with you and teach you something that is true, as in the mystery of the mechanics of the Maya. Instead of hardening your heart or holding someone to the fire in retaliation, attempting to blockade or destruct through the energetics of forcefulness, pushiness, anything to do that is out of integrity with one's alignment frequency. Can you soften instead and hold compassion in your heart if it's right for you? Compassion to what you know to be true, in that we are all characters on this stage and in this age of our own grand play of Maya, and each of us spiraling together or violently hurtling apart. It is not a choice. This awareness of what the passenger knows, when it knows how to see, when it is entrained to what it be. The mind would really enjoy this process if you could but reach it, experience it, of being witness to, rather than obsessed by attempting to run the life. I imagine it anyway. You might enjoy. The only way sometimes to deal with such trauma or drama is to see the lighthearted state of things. How can we attune? First, be, and everything else will be that as it may. When you take the differentiation of the form and mind principle and weave them, spiral them together through space and time with the genetic imprintings underneath the line, what you get is true differentiation, true authenticity, true uniqueness, true integrity of being, true alignment, true purpose, true potential, true profile.